A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by dictatorship. Consider these words and what they mean. When one observes the West and its current state of decay, it's hard to fault them. We live in a situation where the ruling elite fight over the public treasury and how best to utilise it for winning votes. The result is an ever-growing public debt and an increasingly dependent population, all while the tax-paying base shrinks under the burden of state-sanctioned theft. Why bother working hard? Why pay half your income in tax when you can work a lot less or not at all, pay little or no tax, and still enjoy a comfortable life? The modern welfare state saddles the unborn with trillions in debt that we will never repay, while decreasing birth rates, breaking up the family, and throwing millions of Westerners into unnecessary intergenerational poverty. It is evil in every sense of the word. 250 years ago, Lord Woodhousley predicted this situation as though peering through a crystal ball. He couldn't have been more right had he owned a time machine. Enter Dan Andrews, the man known as Dick Ears, to put any doubters to rest that democracy always fails. This man is that failure personified. He is everything Tytler warned about all those years ago. This is why it is imperative that no matter who you vote for in the upcoming state election, do not vote for Daniel Andrews. It would take several hours to fully detail the extent of this wannabe dictator's crimes against the state of Victoria, so we will have to make do with this short video summary. The first thing Dick Ears did after lying his way into office was pay $1 billion to not build a road that Melbourne desperately needs. The previous coalition government finalised the plans to build a connecting road between the Eastern Freeway and CityLink in the west. Daniel Andrews told everyone the contract wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on. That is some expensive paper. The road would have eased congestion in the city substantially by allowing motorists to avoid the already packed out streets of northern Melbourne. The previous government finalised the contracts, ground was about to break, then Dan Andrews won office and decided to screw everyone. He bet we wouldn't punish him for this bald-faced lie, and he may well be right. He cancelled the project at the behest of the unions who control his party with an iron fist. It's no surprise that upon the cancellation of this project, Dick Ears Dan Andrews announced a number of infrastructure projects paid for with your money. No prizes for guessing who benefited the most from the East-West Link cancellation, nor for pointing out who now benefits the most from ALP pork barrelling. This is behaviour we have grown to expect from Scam Dan. Earlier this year, we discovered that his own MPs rorted $388,000 from the taxpayer in order to finance their own campaigns. Andrews then used almost $1 million in taxpayer funds to stymie any investigation into this crime in a direct attack on all Victorians. Ever the lying crook, Daniel Andrews denied all knowledge of this rort despite the fact that he is the leader of the party. He claims he thought it was all above board and that no MP raised concerns, as though this somehow exonerates blatantly corrupt behaviour from his own party. The buck stops with him, right up until criminality takes place, of course. When that happens, he knows nothing. He has not stood down a single MP over this rort, showing without a doubt that he approves of criminal behaviour within his own party. Tolerance of criminality isn't exclusive to his own party either, it extends across the state. Since taking office in Victoria, crimes against the person such as robbery, rape and murder have increased a whopping 34%. In the same time, population grew by just 6.7%, meaning that crimes against the person grew by more than 5 times the rate of population growth. Strangely enough, the 2018 report inflates the number of these crimes in 2014 by about 7,000 compared to the report of that year. The change happened in the 2016 report. Must be magic, otherwise known as a new measurement method that just so happens to make the previous government look worse than it actually was. Much of this increase is likely due to Daniel Andrews' unwillingness to tackle ethnic violence, especially from the African community. Keep in mind, the figures in this report are simply recorded crimes. The real crime rate is likely much higher, given Dan's history of lies and corruption. Telling the truth about the extent and source of this huge increase in crime would mean admitting utter failure in his duty as Premier. No doubt, Dick Ayres would point to the fact that total crime hasn't increased as much in the same time, but this is cool comfort for the huge increase in victims of violence. This surge in violent crime has come despite an equally massive increase in police funding and police numbers. Since Andrews lied his way into office back in 2014, annual funding for Victoria Police has increased by roughly 33%, from $2.3 billion to $3 billion. Not to mention the large increase in fines due to draconian road rules designed purely to raise revenue. It should come as no surprise that the Victoria Police Association are likely the state's most powerful union. This huge increase in funding, for no benefit to Victorians, looks like nothing more than pork barrelling for the union and their 11,000 members. As they say, if it looks like it stinks, it probably does. Victorians suffer at the hands of African invaders, while the police live on our hard-earned, offering little in return. Worse still, even after this increase in funding and crime, he feels it appropriate to charge speaking events for additional protection when far-left thugs show up. Government by force is an extortion racket in and of itself, but Dick Ayres removes all subtlety. If your blood isn't boiling by now, you need to take a good hard look in the mirror. However, none of this corruption comes close to his most recent and worst crime, selling out his own country to the Communist Party of China. The latest Chinese plan for global dominance, designed to hide the fact that their economy is slowing to a halt, is the Belt and Road Initiative. This happens just 2 years after Andrews allowed the Chinese government to purchase a huge stake in the Melbourne port. It's so bad that even far-left, soy-laden Vox have their reservations.
The two sides should work together to build up a new maritime road in the 21st century.
These two phrases were the first mentions of Xi's legacy project, the multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. They're also the two components of the plan. There's an overland economic belt of 6 corridors that serve as new routes to get goods in and out of China, like this railroad connecting China to London, and these gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea to China, and a high-speed train network in Southeast Asia. China's growing influence challenges the status of the US, which has been the world's lone superpower for the last several decades. But isolation is trending in the US, meaning that they are investing less and therefore losing influence around the world. The BRI is China's way of leveraging power to become a global leader. By building relationships and taking control of global trade, China's well on its way.
The Victorian government are the only government in the nation wanting to become a Chinese vassal state. The fact that Daniel Andrews would sign us up to this without consultation with the federal government or the Australian people shows a deep contempt for those he supposedly represents. Even his own party slammed his actions that go against party policy and directly conflict with the national interest. Until they realised whose side they were on, of course. Remember, to the left, the side is the principle. This is Dan's 30 pieces of silver. He's thinking purely of his own interest and nothing else. He will claim it's about jobs and building a better Victoria, but this is a lie. Now, you may be thinking, this amounts to treason, but I'm not so sure, so let's investigate. Treason is defined as a violation of allegiance towards one's country or sovereign, especially the betrayal of one's country by waging war against it, or by consciously and purposely acting to aid its enemies, or a betrayal of trust or confidence. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Daniel Andrews is selling out Australian interests to the Chinese government, who are a direct competitor for world power with our most powerful ally, the United States. I'll let you decide whether or not this constitutes treason. Dick Ayres claims to be acting for all Victorians, but this is a lie. He acts only for himself and for the unions who back him. His interest in the Victorian people is conning us into voting for him by spending money that is not his, all while funneling funds through to his taxpayer-funded union mates. Despite his crimes against the people of Victoria and Australia, recent polling has Andrews looking likely to win the next election. He may well lose, but the fact that he is still even a chance of retaining power is proof that democracy has failed in Victoria and is failing in Australia. Should he win, it will be ominous and show just how far Victoria has fallen. To highlight this fall, we need to look at the second half of Lord Woodhouseley's quote. The average of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence, from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. A return of Daniel Andrews puts Victoria squarely in the stage of apathy moving towards dependence. It will mean Victorians no longer care for their state or their nation and instead prefer bondage, ignorance, and Chinese-style totalitarianism. Regardless of the result, democracy has led us to this situation, thus it has proven itself a failed system in desperate need of reform. When you let the worst in society apply force through the vote, you will get the worst in society elected to office. This is the nature of universal democracy. For this election and for the next, remember to use your vote wisely, and whatever you do, don't vote for Dick Ayres, Daniel Andrews. Thanks for watching, take care, pray for our nation and our state, and I'll see ya when I see ya.